Canada now ranks among the top 10 countries in the world from which automobiles are stolen, shipped, and sold overseas. That is according to Interpol. The International Police Agency says more than 1,500 stolen Canadian vehicles have been identified around the world since February. Sarah Galashan joins me now with more on this story. So, Sarah, where are these cars being found?
Well, for the most part, in parts of the Middle East and in West Africa, where they are being traded and resold, according to Interpol. Most often what we're talking about are luxury SUVs or crossovers. So that's a car-like SUV. And according to Interpol, they are being used as currency by international criminal organizations that are tied to things like human trafficking, drug trafficking, and terrorism. The question is, how did Canada become such a hotspot for this kind of theft, this kind of criminal activity? Already, the Insurance Bureau of Canada had put a very high estimate on this, and in February, we know that the Canadian agencies partnered or enhanced their information sharing with Interpol. And to that, actually, the head of the commissioner for the RCMP spoke to the joint effort that has been underway since February to track these vehicles down. Here's what he said yesterday.
From February 13th to May 16th, we've had 1,553 alerts. That means that there's another law enforcement agency in the world that's queried some of the data that's actually in it. And then that brings up a second portion where there's 250 follow-ups that were made to request for that information. So it's a global effort here. It's not just nationally here, what we're seeing here in Ontario and Quebec, but you're seeing an international effort to combat it.
And just to really drive this home, with the 1,500 vehicles that we're talking about discovered overseas since February, that's not all vehicles that have been stolen in Canada. That is just, Travis, those vehicles that have been stolen from Canada and they're being identified overseas. Right.
I mean, there likely are a lot more out there right now. We've been hearing about this car theft crisis in this country. What is being done, Sarah, in Canada to stop this from happening in the first place?
Well, like I say, so because of this enhanced sharing between Canadian agencies and Interpol, not likely that this 1,500 number is coming as a surprise to them. And in fact, just yesterday, there was a big press conference where the government announced its new national action plan to target specifically organized crime groups, which are suspected of being the primary culprit in this kind of theft. That's really their focus. But earlier today at an unrelated press conference, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was asked about the efforts of her government to try and get a handle on this, stop this kind of theft. And here's a little bit of what she said.
It makes life scary. It makes life more expensive. It raises the insurance rates for everyone. We have toughened anti-money laundering rules and created more tools to enforce those rules. We are also seeking to actually ban some of the equipment which is used to steal cars. We need the legal tools to do this.
So to that end, these legal tools, that's legislation that is now before Parliament. Back in February, there was $28 million that was put toward the Canadian Border Service Agency in order to enhance the screening that is done on containers that are being shipped out of country, out of Canada, to make sure there's no stolen vehicles in those containers. So that is also underway, or work that is underway in the last few months. And as well, in February, a big conference held, and there was some effort to coordinate between insurers and automakers to essentially try and thwart the thieves at the starting point, prevent the cars from actually being stolen in the first place. That's just some of what is being done to this end. Travis?
All right, Sarah Galashan at the Breaking News Desk in Vancouver for us. Thank you, Sarah. For a look at how we got here, we're going to be joined now by Bryan Gast. He's the Vice President of the Investigative Services Division at Equite Association. He joins us tonight from Montreal. So what do you make of Canada being such a hot spot for these kinds of thefts?
Yeah, thefts, in particular vehicles that are being stolen for the purposes of export, has really increased dramatically since COVID. Organized crime has entered into the space even more than they were before. It's high reward, low risk, and a lot of the vehicles from Ontario, Quebec are being stolen for that purpose, for the sole purpose of being exported, and they're funding their organized criminal operations with those proceeds.
Well, why are Ontario and Quebec kind of the hot spots here when it comes to this?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with pure population, high volume of targeted vehicles, SUVs, pickup trucks, luxury sedans, proximity to the Port of Montreal. That's not the only way they're getting out of Canada, but that's historically been the primary method or location for export. So those two things really put Ontario and Quebec in a bad position.
The federal government estimates that 90,000 vehicles are reported stolen every year in Canada. What more needs to be done to get that number significantly down?
Yeah, and there's been some really great action. Last year, the province of Ontario, Solicitor General's office, provided funding for the creation of a provincial auto theft team led by the OPP and participating police services with a dedicated prosecutors team. And significant about that is this is not just a victimless crime. It's not just a property crime. This is organized crime. They are funding their criminal operations. So going after the organized crime groups that are behind it is significant. And then you have February 13th, the summit, the federal summit. So now you have the provinces and the federal government working together, law enforcement across all levels, municipal, provincial, regional, and the federal, working with CBSA. Everybody's working very hard, working with our investigators across the country. And 2024 will be very interesting to see. I mean, last year alone, $1.5 billion of thefts, vehicle thefts in Canada. Ontario represented over 1 million of that, or 1 billion of that, sorry.
And you mentioned organized crime. We do continue to hear that. Do we have any more details in terms of the groups that we're talking about here?
Yeah, and they might not be your traditional organized crime that everybody thinks of, but it's basically people working together to commit a criminal offense. They are highly organized. They are highly connected. They are networks everywhere from the scout that's looking for the vehicles. There is a target list of vehicles that they want, vehicles that are desired overseas. Then the individuals that have the ability to steal the vehicle and then get the vehicle containerized, sent out of the country, and then at the receiving end, receiving that vehicle for either resale or use overseas. But very connected, very organized, and that's what the law enforcement who are doing a wonderful job combating that are really up against.
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is going to be a long-term plan here to fix this problem, to really get to the root of it. In the interim, though, in the short term, what do you recommend that vehicle owners do in this country?
Yeah, we call it a layered approach. I mean, ultimately, it'd be great to have the vehicle itself harder to steal in the first place, and that's a longer-term goal. But really, there are things that the everyday owners of vehicles can do. If you have the luxury of parking in a garage, park in a garage, park in a well-lit area, using a steering wheel lock, using an aftermarket immobilizer that protects against relay attacks, reprogramming attacks, and CAN bus attacks, using a onboard diagnostic port lock, using a tracking service. All of those things add time because the criminal does not want to be in your vehicle for an extended period of time. So anything that you can do to slow down the process, to make it harder, your vehicle less of a target is what we recommend.
Bryan, appreciate you being here tonight. That is Bryan Gast. He is the Vice President of the Investigative Services Division at Equite Association.